Great. Hi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in. This is SAURABH KOCHHAR. I'm founder at Meddo, which is a outpatient clinic platform. And I have with me VIKRAM VUPPALA, who is founder and CEO of Nephroplus, and a very, very dear friend. We have common background with our alma mater in McKinsey. So Vikram, always a pleasure to be able to interact with you.
Likewise.
Great. So just before just before we move into the topic, which is creating resilient and patient-centric healthcare systems, which is I know very close to your heart and is very close to my heart as well. I think it will be good to get a quick background about Nephroplus. We do all know that you've done great in terms of scaling. You've just raised almost a $50 million round. So congratulations, in this time. So it's a brilliant feat, and we are always rooting for you. But please do tell us a bit about Nephroplus.
Absolutely, Saurabh. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to this conversation. Always good to speak with you. Nephroplus is India's largest dialysis network. We currently run about 250 centers across 4 countries. In India, our network is 240 centers strong, and that's spread over 148 cities in 22 states. So right from Jammu, Srinagar to Alipi in Kerala to Guwahati in Assam to Vadodara in Gujarat. So we are spread all over the country. And one of our mission was to make quality dialysis accessible in India. And over the last 10 years, we have been at it. And every month, we keep adding 4-5 dialysis centers and 1 or 2 new cities to the network. So that keeps us going. And it's the number of teammates is 4,000 plus Nephroplus teammates now. And we recently acquired a network in Philippines, and that's scaling up really well about 4 months back. And we last 2 months ago, we signed up with the government of Uzbekistan to run their country's dialysis program. And that's been a big project for us, which was a global tender. And we sort of competed with the world's largest dialysis networks, and we were able to win the tender in a transparent global tender. So I think done 4 rounds of private equity, 10 years at it, really passionate to now redefine dialysis care across other developing markets. So it's been an interesting story so far. But over to you, Saurabh. Would love to answer your question.
I don't think I can name 148 cities in India. So
Same here.
Good. No, so happy to see the progress. Like I said, we're always rooting for you. But I'm sure that the last year,
Saurabh, maybe you can just quickly give an introduction to Meddo. While we know about Meddo, maybe you can just talk a little bit about how Meddo is making an impact in healthcare.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much. Well, what we do is essentially trying to bridge the gap in the outpatient care, right? So our belief is when you talk about whether patient centricity or even a good care process, I think it's very important to understand and realize the role that outpatient care plays, right? So it is the first stop where you either have a good diagnosis or not, right? And that answer significantly changes your journey with your health over the next few years. But in India, it's so broken, it's so distributed, it's so fragmented. It's not even funny. 88% of all clinical establishments in our country are actually single daughter establishments, right? So, so with Meddo, what we are trying to do is actually bring all of that together and bring certain amount of standardization, whether it's in terms of quality, whether it's in terms of delivery, to the outpatient care, and make that as a campaign to make sure that we are walking as a country towards fully covered healthcare, right? So today in India, insurance penetration is upwards of 50%, right? A lot of them already support things like dialysis, outside of home, outside of hospitals. Most of them don't even do that. But less than 1% actually support outpatient care, right? And that's when the world is moving. In US, the rate of increase of outpatient care and ambulatory care is double that of the rate of growth of entire healthcare as a pie. So with all of those things, I think as country, we are not prepared. What we are doing is fairly young. We're a 2-year-old organization. But what we're trying to do is bring all of this together so that whether it's from a channel perspective, whether it's online, offline, in clinic, through video, whether it's in terms of service delivery, whether it's consultations, medicines, reports, and whether it's in terms of technology and getting our health records together. So we've made Meddo as a platform where we bring all of this together and make it a truly one-stop care shop for the patients. Sorry for the long answer, but
absolutely. Absolutely. Delighted to hear more about Meddo. And I think one of the things I'm focused on is there is not enough influence or enough opportunity given on the prevention aspect in India. It's more entire healthcare delivery is towards a curative aspect. So I think a quality platform like Meddo can really bring massive impact and manage the overall disease burden. At the end of the day, we need to look at total cost of care. You can't look at silos as a curative care perspective.
Absolutely. Fully. In fact, there's somebody who put it very beautifully. He said in India, the entire ecosystem is well oiled to push people inside the hospitals rather than keep them out of it. And I think what we as Meddo are trying to do, and I know what you as Nephroplus are trying to do, are all in that direction. And while I know that it's been a great journey, but I also understand that the last year has been a pressure point for both of us, but also for healthcare and other businesses, but more so healthcare systems being pressure tested. So tell us, what do you think has gone right versus wrong? What do you think are the cracks that are very clear and are being opened up?
Yeah, I mean, the COVID time since last March has been quite challenging in a way, Saurabh, in the sense that unfortunately for our patients, we call our patients as guests because we don't want patients in our system to be sort of think that they are patients admitted in an ICU. This is more like a lifestyle disease. We call them guests. So our guests had a terrible time in terms of accessing our centers because of the state borders, restrictions, travel restrictions, sealing, all sorts of stuff. And many of our centers from this 240 centers network, many of them are in the state, right at the border of a state. So people from, for example, Tamil Nadu were coming into Kuppam in Andhra Pradesh. People from Delhi, nearby UP towns were coming into Gurgaon. So there was a lot of restriction put at state borders that created quite a mess. And as you know, Saurabh, the supply chain systems were completely broken during the first quarter of this fiscal year, April to June. It was in a terrible mess. But I think somehow what I realized is while the teammates, our clinical staff were not able to travel in a normal way, our guests were not able to travel, our supply chain systems were broken, the team stepped up because the dialysis, it's not like a kidney stone surgery or a cataract surgery that can wait, right? Dialysis has to be done. If dialysis is not done, our guests will die. So I think the operations team, the supply chain team have really stepped up and figured out how to move the consumables, the material inside the state from one city to the other city, how the teammates figured out how to stay near the dialysis center itself rather than going back to their home state, which is on the other side of the border. So I think because of travel restrictions, our volume got hit by about 7-8% because people were not able to access. But I think the team pulled off and we were able to recover by the end of the year. And dialysis, as you know, is a chronic. It's not a discretionary treatment. People have to be on dialysis. Unlike other discretionary treatment, it's not like a cosmetic surgery network or a IVF surgery network. This because of the nature of the treatment, we were able to get back vast majority of our guests. But last year has been challenging, but the team has really stepped up because at Nephroplus, ultimately, one of the core values is the guest care comes first, and we need to do whatever it takes to serve them. And the budget, the investments, all that becomes secondary. And it's not even that I as a leader need to tell the team what to do, but the team just knows the innate value system and they just make it happen.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. And it's so heartening that irrespective of industry, irrespective of segment, irrespective of business, one of the common threads that I've seen across is, especially during the last year, everybody who's kind of now coming out stronger has the exact same reason behind it at the core, which is the team. And it's you don't realize the value of it more often than not, because it's just you're so embroidered with everything that's been coming to you from all angles. But I think irrespective, like I said, every story is coming down to team and how the team has brilliantly responded to this. But I think
absolutely, crisis I think makes the team stronger, brings the team closer. Crisis actually builds that muscle in a team system. I totally agree with you.
Correct. And I think before getting systems to be resilient, I think it's more important that the teams be resilient to be able to handle such shocks. And if those individual components become resilient enough, the systems themselves will become resilient. Absolutely. Right? And I would say healthcare has been a subject where somewhere the person who's most at the center of it is the one who's the most lost. And I remember you saying it, right? That because we all take, it's not because of any intent problem. We are all taking ourselves and our job so seriously that there is, as a wider envelope, I would say, we forget that the person that we're really trying to work for, has to be the most important person, right? So, in the I would say pursuit of giving the best care, in the pursuit of having the best technologies, in the pursuit of having the best treatment programs, somewhere we forget that actually the care has to originate at the person, right? And I think, what are your thoughts around it, right? That how do we make sure that we are building quality healthcare resilient systems, but not forgetting this patient who's actually going through so much and still has to run pillar to post?
Absolutely, Saurabh. I think there are three things, right? One is I strongly believe that a patient or a guest in our case has to be part of the leadership team. For example, we are fortunate to have Kamal Shah as a co-founder at Nephroplus, who has been on dialysis himself for 23 years. And he has a veto on everything clinical that can impact clinical care at Nephroplus, right? The reason he joined as a co-founder on day one is he said, hey, many companies start, but along the way, as you grow, the mission gets diluted, the zeal towards patient centricity gets diluted. I said, you have a veto, right? So I think that has really helped Nephroplus. That's point number one, is every healthcare organization needs to have the core stakeholder. At the end of the day, as you said, ultimately we are trying to help the customer who is the patient here, right? If you can get a patient as a part of the leadership team, co-founder or a management teammate, head of operations, that will be fantastic. The second thing is we need to have a way to keep listening, to how to have a ear to the ground. We need to establish channels to measure customer satisfaction, hear from the guests, hear from the patients in the healthcare system. And I think many organizations, they just use the NPS scoring system and then take a step back. But NPS is great, but I think the leadership team has to put their ears to the ground, talk to a set of guest patients and hear from them how things are going. For example, there was a incident where in one of the centers in NCR, we actually invested 3 times the normal bed cost in a very sophisticated recliner. And we said, hey, okay, a normal bed costs 35,000. We are investing 1 lakh worth recliner in each of these recliners, right? And when I went to see the center, the guests there were consistently complaining about the 1 lakh recliner, right? So we may think that we are doing an amazing thing by over investing, making their life comfortable. But if we don't hear the guests, then we are forcing them to adapt to something. So then that's why I think the keeping ears to the ground, listening from the patients, from the guests as to what is good, how do they see it helping them or hurting them, that's very important. The third thing is the culture point, Saurabh, which is if you can figure out a way to sort of have it as one of the core values in the healthcare companies set, right? For example, in Nephroplus, the number one core value, if you go to our website, there are 3 core values. The first core value is guest care comes first. Everything else being secondary, right? Duty timings, staffing issues, budget issues, everything is secondary. The guest care comes first. If the guest needs care at a certain point, has certain issue, that needs to be resolved. Everything else is secondary. And it cannot be just a value in your vision, mission, value statement. It needs to be reinforced every single touch point that the leadership has with the entire organization. So we keep rubbing it in consistently. We conduct quizzes. We push a lot on pushing that core value into the company. So the culture becomes the third very important value, where it needs to be part of your values, stated values. And then you need to rub it in again and again and again in every single communication platform available, Saurabh. So these 3 things, what I wanted to say.
Yeah. No, I think these are pretty much on point. The fourth thing I would say, maybe it's not the fourth point to this, but more of a question, right? How do you get the doctors along? See, at the end of the day, one of the important things always in healthcare comes down to that, right? That the core caregiver, the core, the key component or the key opinion leader in this entire process is the doctor, right? And how do you ensure that? And not maybe you can answer this both specifically to Nephroplus as well as in general, right? And in broader healthcare systems, how do we get doctors on board with this I would say way of thinking and ensure that we're still able to deliver quality care to patients or guests? Sorry.
Yeah, honestly, Saurabh, that's the most important thing in healthcare. There's no healthcare without a doctor, right? While we are serving the customers, we have to, in order to be able to serve the customers who are the patients here, we need to have doctors aligned with what we are trying to do, right? That's ultimately the most important spinal cord of a system, I would say. And it took us time to get here. Initially, there was a lot of reticence. There was a lot of skepticism in terms of some of the nephrologists that we were dealing with. They refused to call our patients as guests. They still wanted to call them patients and not get on board, right? But I think along the way, when they saw that there was a genuine intent to redefine the modality of care, to redefine the service level aspects of care, it was not just a value statement, right? It was invested. For example, in one of the government centers that we have, in a PPP, public private partnership model center, the government was supposed to, that state government was supposed to do viral markers test, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, HIV test every quarter. For a couple of 1.5 quarter, the government refused to do because of lack of budget or whatnot. Then they had a discussion with the nephrologist, and we said, okay, Nephroplus will invest on its own because the guest care comes first. Without testing on the viral markers, how do we assign them to the right equipment, right? So there are these moments of truth available to all of us at times when we need to double down and make that investment and communicate to the doctors as well. So I totally agree with you. Initially, it's going to be very hard to get the doctors on board, because inertia is true for every profession, Saurabh, not just doctors, right? any change comes with a lot of inertia. And we just have to keep at it. It didn't happen for us for the first 3-4 years, but then we just kept on doing it, requested, pleaded, cajoled, coaxed. So all channels, all kinds of interventions. But I think when you attain that critical mass, which Nephroplus has attained that critical mass now, it gets definitely easier. So I wouldn't say it's impossible. I wouldn't say it's easy, but if you are at it in a genuine manner, you will make it happen.
Correct. Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed.
All angles.
Great. So there is a few comments and a question. So of course, the first comment I want to read is great to see Mr. Vikram speaking. He is really a game changer in nephrology segment. I fully agree. But I think the other question is, what do you think is the role of leadership in building resilience into the system? And I would say leadership both from an organizational perspective, and I would say leadership at the country level in terms of making sure that, there are enough, I would say, incentives being built in, or certain regulatory aspects being built in to kind of make sure that we are building towards that. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately from a private sector perspective, Saurabh, I fully believe that in India, the private sector is the real solution to the aspect of healthcare, right? The government, I think I've said this openly many times in many conferences, that the government can be a good payer, can be a good regulator, but the private sector has to step up. Now, for the private sector to step up, the payer, the regulator have to create an amenable environment for the private sector, because the private sector, if it has to invest, then of course the private sector will look at a IRR, will look at the returns, financial returns from the project, right? So I think the biggest thing from the government side, the leadership has to step up and sort of make the payment. If you ask any of the healthcare delivery organizations in India, their biggest concern is timely payments from the payer, right? The cash segment, the TPA segment, or the private insurance segment is reasonably easy to serve, but anything to do with public sector, credit volume, that's the tough part. So from a leadership perspective, the government side has to step up. On the private sector side, the leadership has to have a longer term horizon. If people are looking at, okay, let me raise a round of funding and in 3 years we'll try to build something and then flip it, I think that's a wrong way from a building for a healthcare system. Again, Saurabh, I'm purely talking from a healthcare ecosystem, not from any sector, right? So healthcare needs little bit more patience. Healthcare needs, because the word of mouth, the trust and the reputation of a brand matters a lot in healthcare. But once it gets there, then there are returns to be created, right? So from a leadership position, leadership requirement, I think little bit more patience. And I think some of the healthcare delivery organizations, the leaders tend to go into the profiteering aspect as and when possible in an opportunistic way, and that comes back and bites them, right? So healthcare is a lot about trust, and every brand at the end of the day, Saurabh, that brand is nothing but a promise. Once the profiteering starts, the brand gets tarnished, the brand gets defeated in that purpose. So those are few things from the government side and the private side.
No, I think fully on point, fully agree with that. Somebody gave the slogan minimum government, maximum governance, right? And any change, I believe, we have done enough change management, organizations, through McKinsey and elsewhere. I think no change can ever happen without the top being fully invested in making the change happen, and having those change leaders, those sparks within the organization. So I think I truly agree with you and believe that the most important component is leadership being fully bought in and driving the change agenda. If that's not happening, then the change just wouldn't come through. Right? Yes. The other question, the other question is an interesting one. I think I know the answer that you will bring, but is resilience more of a human personal attitude trait, or is it a strategy, system, or a technology thing?
That's a easy one. Resilience is completely a human, personal, attitudinal thing. It has nothing to do with technology or strategy. If the personal attitude is, it's like I keep going back to the team to say, if you look at what Muhammad Ali has done, right? It's not about how many times you fall, but how many times you have the resilience to get back on your feet. It's not about being punched. It's about getting back into the ring, right? So the resilience is all about the human personal attitude. And once you have that, then people will figure out, they're smart enough to figure out what technology to use, what strategy to use. All that is a secondary thing. But the core is completely, it's a human personal attitudinal thing.
I fully agree. I think it is a very personal trait. For an organization, it becomes a personal trait when, I would say, the critical mass, the bulk of the organization, each individual shows the same resilience towards the same cause. And when all of those kind of just jump up and down in the same phase together, it brings about the change which is system wide. But that doesn't make resilience a system thing, right? So it is still each individual component doing its own thing in the rightful manner.
Yeah, Saurabh, just to add a flavor to what you're saying, resilience is a cultural attribute of an organization, right? So if the organization leadership consistently pushes the team, the individual teams, individual functions to take resilient resolutions, then the muscle gets stronger and stronger. But if the leader causes the muscle to atrophy, the system will lose that resilience muscle. So it's a very important cultural attribute of an organization as well. And it's up to the leadership how they'll keep it live and kicking and strong.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll just take last one or two questions. We're almost running out of time. So the other question is, what are the behavioral changes that we need, to actually bring about a resilient and patient-centric system, right? So from a behavior perspective of each interested or party in the chain, what are the behavioral level changes needed?
Yeah, I think behavioral change, I think, is more related to the individual employees of an organization. We call our employees as teammates, but there needs to be consistent effort made by the company's leadership in conducting training classes, counseling. For example, at Nephroplus, we have created a core team of mid-management team, roughly about 50 people, who are the strong backbone of the organization. So there is management team, there is the core mid-management team, and then there are distributed teammates across the country and now across Philippines and Uzbekistan, right? So I think the leadership has to invest time in behavioral, making people aware of what are the attributes that are elicited in a resilient organization, and educate them, and firstly give them sort of the best practices in our language, sort of the best practices framework of behavioral attributes. And then I invest a lot of time. One of my job as the CEO or founder CEO is to have one-on-ones with my rockstar mid-management teammates. And that's when I sort of counsel them, hey, in this particular context, I've seen you behave this way. If I were you, I would do it differently, right? I won't bring that up in a group setting, but in a one-on-one setting is beautiful that way to talk transparently about behavioral issues. And unfortunately, Saurabh, in India, the talent is not that deep. They have not been exposed to many professional environments, and these guys are young. The mid-management in our company are very young. So we as leaders need to train the behavioral attributes of these youngsters, and we need to give them enough examples of how it can be done in a good behavior, in a desired behavioral manner. I think it's totally up to the leadership. I don't think we should worry about the returns on investment on any kind of training, including behavioral training, but that's best done in a one-on-one setting to your core leadership team.
Correct. You're right. And in fact, it's not really limited to healthcare. I remember Carl's Jr. was setting up, burger joints. And this is my erstwhile food panda avatar. And then group leadership, Carl's Jr. Was here. And I asked them a very simple question. I said, getting into India, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing? They said the biggest challenge, and it was very surprising for me, was not supply chain, was not instruments, was not quality. They said somehow people just don't follow the process. They said, you have to make a burger, and the process for the burger is very clear. You take the bun, you put the patty with A, B, C, and you put sauces in a certain manner, you put the other bun, and it's done. He said, time and again, we will see that we'll train these people, we'll just turn our backs, and within 5 minutes, they're finding another process which is shortcut to the process, which seemingly gives the same burger, but not really the same burger.
Right?
And it's like our disproportionate time is going in training and retraining and retraining. And that was their biggest challenge. So bringing the same thing, what do you think now you're seeing, healthcare systems and, service delivery across 4 countries now? How do you think India is different from whether it's Uzbekistan, whether it's Philippines and other countries that you're seeing?
So I think, I understand. I think India is a complex country, Saurabh. India is like 29 different countries altogether, right? Every region is different. What we do in UP versus what we do in Karnataka is extremely different, right? So the kind of training intensity that we need to do in Karnataka is much different. I would say different than compared to what you do in UP and Bihar. Now, the point here is India has the quantity, but not the quality, right? In terms of the manpower. But the beauty is there is so much quantity that if you filter hard enough, you will get a small mass of raw talent. And what I realized through Nephroplus is it's much better to take completely raw talent in India and mold them completely according to the principles, the cultural attributes of Nephroplus, as compared to picking up talent who is already experienced in the market. Because there is a baggage from the other organizations, unprofessional organizations, and so on. Philippines, for example, is quite different. Philippines, we saw that people are much more oriented towards service, and they will follow the process to a T much better than in India. So Uzbekistan is very raw. They don't know proper protocols. They don't know what are the cutting edge practices in the nephrology ecosystem. So its talent is raw. The talent is sincere, but it's very raw. So it will take us an year to get to a stage there. But India is extremely complex. If any organization has figured out how to manage in different parts of India, then they will have better chance of success in other countries as well.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Any parting thoughts?
No, I think I would just leave the conversation with this thought. Going back to the number one thing about resilience and patient centricity is every healthcare organization should figure out a way to get a patient in their leadership team. If it's an oncology startup or a healthcare company, have a cancer survivor as part of your team. If it's an IVF fertility network, get a person who has personally went through an IUI IVF journey, right? That will yield rich dividends the way Nephroplus has benefited from my co-founder's experience in dialysis. That thing is picking up in rest of the world. But in India, I still don't hear people talking about having the core customer as part of your leadership team. I would love to see more of that happen, Saurabh, in India. I'll part with that.
No, thank you so much, and I hope so too. I think your message is loud and clear, and I fully agree with that. So thank you so much, Vikram, again for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thanks, everybody. Bye.